Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today our subject is contemporary issues and trends in education. It is lecture number 29 and we will discuss about a role of private sector education. The outlines of the lectures are purpose, causes of growth in the private education sector, education structure and suggestions. What is the purpose of private sector education? Education provided by a private educational individual or organization rather than by the state or a public body. So private education is not an option for most families. Private education or private schools often play better than charter schools as well as offer benefits that are more competitive. However, private schools teachers still on average make less than their public school counterparts do. The purpose of this presentation is to provide historical descriptive analysis of various procedural trends and developments that emerged in Pakistan for private sector schools education. Because there is a less conflict, there is less distraction. Your students can focus on what is important, their education and simply being a kid. Success in continuing education because of the smaller class size and more individual attentions. Private schools can offer better security when planning for college. Expand private sector role in the system of school level education in Pakistan. Now, what are the causes of growth in the private education sector? There are different causes and different actions to take new year to grow our private schools, like reconsidered our marketing execution, refine our school tour, analyze our application process, evaluate our re-enrollment prospects, and zero in on reporting, and mobilize our word of mouth team and improve parent communications. So first of all, the main cause, that is poor quality of public schools, means quality differential is there. Poverty and lack of access is there. Low economy of developing countries. Lack of teachers or having teachers untrained. No classroom is there. Lack of materials for education. Denied educations for children with disabilities. Parents value their children's security. Children get access to reasonable educational facilities. Public does not have proper monitoring and evaluation system. Public doesn't have proper human resource system. The teachers working the public system have low morale. Provision of infrastructure is patchy. Average poor provision of software means books, furnitures and so on, etc. So here I ask question that how do I attract more students to my institutes? Remember that always diversify your services, like identify your value propositions. Know perfectly the most attractive features of your program or school. Promote and make unique events. Make them visualize. Customize your attention. Use visual tools. Collect all the data. Take advantage of word of mouth. Educational structure. What is the structure of education? Organization of the education system and its of structure. The educational system is divided into 4 levels, that is pre-primary, Compulsory means single structure primary and lower secondary schools are education, and upper secondary and higher education. Education is compulsory for children for 10 years and from 6 to 16 years of age. Kinds of institutions are there like government institutions, federal government institutions, and garrison institutes, cadet schools and colleges, and local body institutions. Moreover, the public sector institutions. Then, in kind of institutions, more schools are like Danish schools, private elite and non-elite English medium schools, madrasas. Missionary schools are there. Other private schools. Private school enrollment is concentrated in urban areas and among the wealthiest households. In Pakistan, where the majority of the private schooling is unsubscribed by the government and therefore subject more directly to household income. Even in rural areas such as rural Punjab, Pakistan, and so on, first more private schools in larger and richer villages, and in richer and more literate settlements within villages. Similarly, in another one of the research says that even among urban slum households, children of wealthier and better educated parents are more likely to go to the private primary schools. These patterns are consistent with the unsubsidized nature of the majority of private schooling, which calls for the ability to afford the costs as well as the greater availability of supply side factors such as teachers and infrastructures in more affluent and urban areas. And execution is the rural advantage in the 16 to 18 age group in our neighboring countries, and moreover, perhaps to the important extent due to some initiatives that subsidizes secondary schooling for girls in rural areas, and the most secondary schools are private aided. So other private schools are Beacon House schools, city schools, 4G foundation system is there, Lahore University of Management Sciences, Punjab colleges and root school system, Lahore grammar schools, and then middle income groups like Dar Arkam schools. This is having a religious dimension, and allied schools and international private schools that include Pop Turk International School. Then ultimate objectives of Pakistan education policies. What are the ultimate objectives? First of all, the educational landscape of Pakistan has gone through numerous transformations in the past 2 decades. Developing countries face the dual challenges of increasing enrollment rates while improving students' achievements. Though considerable progress has been made in recent years in raising primary education levels, low enrollment rates persist in regions such as Sub-Saharan Africa, West and Southwestern Asia, and South Asian. So, compounding this failure, learning outcomes in many developing countries remain dismally low. The intervention we evaluate, called the Promoting Low Cost Private Schooling in Rural Sindh program, and entailed the provision of schools through public-private partnership to 161 villages randomly chosen from the sample of 199 qualifying locales. So, private entrepreneurs who were given the responsibility of establishing and operating primary schools. So, all local children between the age of 5 and 9 were eligible for the free enrollment. So, the entrepreneurs received per child subsidy from the Sindh provincial government. Enrollment levels have been on the rise with net primary enrollment rate for children 5 to 9 years of age 42% in 199 to 57 in 2009. A massive 36 percent point increases means you mean 50 but 15% over a decade. So the gender parity index for the net primary enrollment has also changed from 0.68 in 2001 to 0.84 in 2009, a positive trend toward gender equality. Moreover, in addition to the change in enrollment, education delivery is being done through many non-state providers such as for-profit private, not for-profit religious and other secular schools. So this has also increased outreach both in urban as well as rural areas. So according to the National Education Census 2005, 33% of the total children enrolled are in private education institutions in Pakistan. According to the Pakistan Social and Living Standards Measurement Survey, government schools' primary enrollments have gradually decreased from 75% in 2012 to 70% in 2009, whereas it was 88% in 1991. Then the changes in education sectors that have been taking place in Pakistan have created an environment with numerous opportunities as well as challenges in terms of policy development. With an increasing population of children under the age of 16 and the addition of Article 25A under the 18th Amendment Act 2010 to the Constitution, the government is faced with the daunting task of enrolling all the children of age 5 to 16 years in the country as well as improving the quality of the education for sustained access. Even though the enrollment in government schools is much bigger than any other sector, the declining trend in favor of non-state providers is significant. The government needs to examine and collaborate with non-state partners strategically for both education provision and quality management. The enrollment in private sectors. The overall share of this private sector enrollment is around 36%. Then its enrollment 42% in pre-primary education. Primary stage, that is 13%, middle stage, that is 58%, and high, that is 45%. Higher secondary, that is 34%, and as per National Education Policy 2009. Then comes historical development of the private system of education in Pakistan. Remember that private sector engagement in the provision of educational services at the primary and secondary levels in South Asia takes various types. Schools fully financed and managed by the private sector account for virtually all of private sector engagements in primary and secondary education in Pakistan. So government financed and privately managed schools are highly prevalent in Pakistan and have considerable presence in overall this region. So according to the latest household survey data available for 7 of the 8 regional centers or countries, almost one third of school children are enrolled in schools identified as private schools with a high concentration in Bangladesh, India, Nepal and Pakistan. From period 1, that is pre-independent period before 1947, then period 2, that is start from onward political development 1947 to onward, and the third period that starts from 1979 to onward. Private education in Pakistan has a long history dating back prior to independence. Like limited data suggest that private schools catered to a niche market restricted to the big cities from 1947 to 1972. The market for private schooling was dominated by missionary run schools or local schools in imitating the missionary model, mainly used by the elite. In 1972, private schools were nationalized. The policy was reversed in 1979. Private schools were allowed to open and return to the original owners. However, government policies toward private schools was and still is one of a laissez-faire, and there are no subsidies in the form of grants to parents or schools, as in other countries like Bangladesh, Philippines, and India, so that private sector rise and survive purely as a market-based phenomenon. Then there are some suggestions or recommendations, but before going into the suggestions or recommendations, uh, we explain that disaggregated test scores that are available for different countries, especially Pakistan, that show that on average privately managed schools performed at least as well as government managed schools in terms of student test scores at a significantly lower cost to society. At the same time, it is important to acknowledge the average poor performance in private schools, and moreover, there is you can say there is a significant variability in the students' achievement among the schools of both types. So, with a large overlap between test score distributions of two types of schools, indicating the existence of many bad private schools as well as good government schools. So we can point out that several advantages, characteristics of private schools. In particular, we find substantial, albeit indirect, support for the teacher's behavior and accountability as a driver of private schools' effectiveness. So, nevertheless, these advantages would not suffer to include student achievement over the long run, and in the professional knowledge and skill of available teachers, particularly in economically disadvantaged area. It is also important to realize that in an education market, the quality of government schools serves as a benchmark against which private schools differentiate themselves. So, the lower the quality of government schools, the lower the quality of private schools, unless the market is competitive among the private schools. So, which is unlikely in many rural areas. So, higher wages of government teachers do not seem associated with the high students' achievement outcomes. Hence, a focus on students' achievements in policy dialogue and policy making, coupled with strengthen governance and accountability systems. So, it would be important. So, this requires a system of reliable and regular measurement of students' achievements to begin with. On the other hand, many private schools may imitate elite ones in visible aspects of infrastructure, facilities, methodologies, and curriculum. Local bodies have the potentials to contribute and the development of education in urban areas. Therefore, district governments may be encouraged to sponsor education in their area of jurisdiction. Special incentives may be given to NGOs and private sector to establish female schools in rural areas of Pakistan. Private sectors may be encouraged to establish technical and vocational education. They may be provided soft loans in this regard. Now there are some suggestions like rules of regulations and affiliation must be observed and strictly followed. Private sector should offer salary and other benefits as per with teachers working in government system. Then government should encourage and support private sectors in identifying and opening ghost schools. That is a term used in Pakistan for those schools, those were established on paper or schools where teachers do not come regularly but enjoy salary. So we further suggest government should transfer these schools to private sector and use these schools for improving education of rural areas. And if we conclude, then private sector is playing a key role in the development of school education. The national education policies and plans advocated the establishment of private institutions in the country. Pakistan is still struggling in achieving the target of education for all and Millennium Development Goals. About 50% of the population is illiterate. The participation rate at primary and secondary level in rural areas of Pakistan is not satisfactory. Government alone cannot solve the problems of education of this country because of limited resources. Involvement of private sector could not only improve the education of children but will also generate a new culture of public. This was all about this. For being with me, stay blessed. Allah Hafiz.